Alright, this video is about cams, valve sizes, compression ratios, and timing. So how those kind of affect each other. In other words, trying to pick the right performance cam for your engine size can be a little difficult, and sometimes getting the compression the right way for the cam and everything to work and run properly and cool properly the way you want it to can be kind of tricky to do. So sometimes, like what happened to me, is I went too large in the cam and for the valve size I have and the compression ratio. So what happens a lot of times if you do that, you have an engine that wants to fall on its face. Start to hit the gas and it might pop back through the carburetor. A lot of people will go, oh, well, that's the jetting. And no, it's if you have too low of a compression ratio. So let me give you an example here. So if you go with a large cam and or big valves or a bigger cam than stock, typically you should have a higher compression ratio than stock as well. The more air and more fuel, so if you have big valves and you have a big cam, and the more air and more fuel, the more compression it's going to need to fire that fuel and air mixture. So a lot of guys say stock for timing is to have 28 to 32 degrees. And that's with stock valves, stock cam, stock compression ratio, everything's original. That's usually where they ended up when you had 7.5 degrees before top dead center as your baseline for your timing. Your total advance usually was around 28 to 32, depending on, and some of the distributors, when they had the dual vacuum advances in the late models, it went up even more than that, but most of them were 28 to 32. Back in the old days, one of the things we used to do on all the stock engines that we'd rebuild, even though they had 7.5 to 1 compression ratio stock, so you'd always set the timing at 28 degrees. And the reason that we did that is because for fear that the people would put regular gas in it. And people did. They would run regular gas in their air-cooled engine. The reason that I always say use premium fuel in your Volkswagen is because your combustion temperature is much higher than it is like with a water-cooled engine. And because it's a higher temperature, it makes more pressure, just like water and steam. Steam drives trains, you know what I mean? So hotter is higher compression. So even though the compression ratio might be low, the combustion pressure is going to be higher typically on a Volkswagen than even on a water-cooled engine with a higher compression ratio. So as a general rule in timing, 28 degrees is pretty safe. 32 is possible on a engine, and but if you've really kind of gotten, and that's the total advance, what happens is your initial timing, which is usually, 7 degrees before top dead center, 7.5 is the stock, it might not be enough for the cam that you have. So some cams, if you have very low compression, if you have high compression, you might not have this issue. You still can play with your timing curve a bit. And so a lot of the racers really have that figured out in timing. So they'll have like an MSD box where they can change their timing at lower RPMs and mid-range and all that stuff, and then make it go to full advance at whatever. So there's all kinds of things you can do with timing to get even more horsepower. But I'm not going to talk about that stuff. I'm not the expert on this. But I am going to tell you a little bit about what I do know. So what advancing your timing does is it brings, the more advanced it is, as your piston's coming up the cylinder, that means that it's firing before it reaches top dead center. So 7 degrees before top dead center is, say let's almost at top dead center, it's a little bit before. And then after top dead center would be retarded timing, like really retarded. And most timing is done before top dead center. I mean, some years of smog cars and stuff like that, and trying to get them to not have as much NOx, I think, is the issue. Is they have it after or at top dead center, and that, you know, makes an engine not run very well. So if you have it more advanced, it can run better, and the reason it can do that is because if it's more advanced, and there's a limit to this. Again, we'll kind of go over that. But the more advanced it runs, then the more time that it has in the combustion chamber to actually burn. So if you have a lot of compression, you don't need as much advance. So if you have a lot of compression, when the piston goes all the way up, it has enough air in there and fuel and enough compressed air inside there. And same thing with turbo. So when you have a lot of compression, it doesn't need to be as advanced as much. Okay, when you don't have as much compression, that's when you need more advance. Now on like Chevys, we used to run up to, I believe it was 14 degrees at idle. Okay, so is it possible to run 12 or 13 degrees at idle? Sure, it can be done, but now you got to watch your total advance, and you got to watch things like pre-ignition. So pre-ignition is pinging, and sometimes pre-ignition happens and you can't really hear it. So you kind of got to be careful when you start playing with timing and going above spec on it. So there are circumstances when you have big valves, say you've got 40-35 valves, and you've got a larger cam, okay, that you might have to over advance your timing more than 7.5 degrees. Now I'm running on that one, I believe 12 at idle. Now the issue that you run into is this. And so let's say my total advance is 32 degrees, or it's more than that. I think I'm at 34, I think is what I remember putting in there, is when I'm going down the road and it's at full advance, is how much heat is getting to the exhaust valve. Now I'm running stainless steel exhaust valve, so it's going to take a little more heat than a regular engine will. So what happens is, because that heat's in there longer, it starts to get the exhaust valves hot, and that's what you got to be concerned with, is if it's over advanced. If it's too much advance on the other end, then you're going to have issues possibly with burning exhaust valves or shortening the life of them some way or another. So what we used to do, I'm going to give you an example using a Chevy, because it's something that we played a lot more with this stuff, the VWs. You know, like I said, I wasn't really into it. Guys with the MSD stuff, they of course do the stuff that's like verbatim for them. But what I would do is I would take off, I'd go to pick apart, and on a Chevy, if I had one, it would be nice to show you. We had, you take the rotor off, there's a couple of weights and some springs on there that help, where all the advance is done in the top of the distributor. And what we used to do is go to pick apart. Well, we call it snake apart. I'm not going to tell you how that we acquired them, but we used to get a lot of the weights and springs from pick apart, and then what we do is go, okay, these are a little stiffer, these are a little light, these are a little whatever, so we could have our advance come on when we wanted it to. So again, we did it the old school mechanical way, and you know, that's, I said, if you're running a racing engine, then you can go above those rules. You know, you can go into those higher advances. I don't know what the guys are running total advance, you know, at 7,000 or 8,000 RPMs, or are they going back to retarding it more? I don't know. But you can kind of play with that stuff with the Chevy. Now, I believe that the CB Performance Magnus Spark has a similar thing. You take the rotor off and there's springs on there. If you have one of those, let me know. It'd be nice to know, because I was thinking about that when I saw somebody putting one on. I saw some extra springs there, and I went, hey, they give you something to do some mechanical advancing and play with your advance to get the proper amount. So like what this engine likes it does not run well at all unless I have it at like 12 degrees. It just doesn't want to get off of idle. You'll hit the gas and it'll go, you know, it just doesn't. And then it gets, the RPMs get up a little bit and it just, whoom, takes off. And people go, well, it's your accelerator pump's dry or your whatever. We've exhausted all those things. It's not that, it's timing is what's happening. So it is popping back through the carburetor. It's kind of a little bit of a, it can pop back through the carburetors if you have dual carbs anyway, but sometimes that's timing, kind of letting you know that the cam might be too big for what you've got compression for. Now, I'm going to give you an example on that right now. This is a 2007, and it has 8 1/4 to 1. Now, you might say, well, 8 1/4 is a lot of compression. Well, you got to look at other things too. You've got to look at your engine size. So if this was a 2332, and it had 8 to 1 and it had the same cam in it, it probably wouldn't care. But if it's a, you know, since it's a 2007, inches also help you with that, or cc's help you with more air and fuel. So if you've got big valves and large cc engine, that's going to work better together. But when you're trying to put big valves in a smaller one, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that you got to play with timing to get everything to work out right. Now, I looked on the Samba on this, and I didn't see really much of any information other than people were like, oh no, you can't run better than 7.5 degrees. It's like, you might need to. If you've got performance cam, if you don't have enough compression, you know, that's the thing, is you run into that issue where you might have to use timing to get it there. And then you might have to back off your total advance and then bring up your idle advance so that it wants to come off of idle better, because you've got too big of a cam for the compression ratio that you have. I mean, it's not that it's not wrong. It's just you just have to play with tuning it to get it to work right. So one of the things, if you're gonna play with this stuff, you want to do is you want to get the engine nice and hot and warm. And let's say you're going for an over-advanced situation. Get it really hot, nice and really warm as it's ever going to be. And then put it into a lugging situation and floor it, okay? If it pings when you do that, that's too much timing for that engine. It's just not going to work. You're going to have to back it off, because you never want your engine to ping. If it pings, it's too much advance. You're going to have to bring it back. The same thing that happens too if you have high compression. So like if you're going for too much compression with the fuel you're using, then you know you're either gonna have to increase the quality of fuel, which I would highly recommend doing that, or back the timing off. And if you're starting to go where you're less than 28 degrees total advanced, then you know you're gonna have to go with fuel, guys. You're gonna have to put better fuel in your car, and you should always be running premium in it anyway. Now, this isn't like a rule of thumb video where you just go with everything that Mike says. This is basically to open your eyes and get you working and get you thinking and get you understanding your engine and what's happening, and do more reading and stuff like that to find out what you might want to do with your situation. Now, I've seen people run an Engel 110 compatible cam. So Engel 110 or Web 86 or FK, I think it's 7, okay, are like similar in the range. I even had a 268. It's an old cam number that I don't even have specs on, but it's in the same area as that. It might have more lift and a little less duration. All those are kind of in that area. Now, I like the Web 86, and the reason I like the Web 86 is you can solve some of your cam issues by using ratio rockers. So you're using a cam that doesn't have as much lift and duration, and it's designed like an FK7, where you put the ratio rockers on to make up for the cam size to get the proper amount of lift you need. That's what's in my other bus, not what's in this one. This one, I just happened to have one that I had laying around for years, and I was like, hey, looks like kind of in the right range where we want to be. and it's a little too big, but that's okay. It's working fine the way I've got it set up now. With more advance, worked fine. I don't know if I wouldn't want to really take it apart and increase the compression ratio. I think I would have to mill the heads to do that. So I think I was at 55 deck height, if I recall correctly. I have to watch the video on the engine build again. But I think I was at 55 deck height, and I don't want to go any tighter than that deck height. From what I understand from talking to different guys, some guys tell me 45 is kind of the, well, like the bottom basement. Some guys have gone tighter than that, but I'm not going to even think about that. But say if I went to 45, you know, a deck height, and then, you know, I could probably get a little more compression out of it, or I'd have to mill my heads, and I don't really want to mill the heads. I like the way that I like more fire in the head, and, you know, I like the way that they're set up right now. It just seems like I'd go out and spend money on machine work and stuff like that that's unnecessary. So the easiest way to solve the problem was timing. Give it a little more timing, and it seems to be running great now. It loves it so much more when I have it, you know, at about 12 degrees on idle. And I still have, you know, stock 1 1/8 rockers on this, so the only thing I could do is go maybe to 40 horse, and I don't think that would even, I don't even know if that would work. I've never done that before. Well, let's tell you guys some stuff that I've done over the years. We ran the Engel 110 with even as low as 7.5 compression ratio, and not had the engine be overcammed with a 1776. And I've ran, and that's probably the smallest engine I ran that cam with, and it worked great. We had a 1776 that was 8-to-1. That even ran better. Okay, and that's why I say, so a Web 86 you could work with on that too. Could do the same type of thing. Like this engine's running a Web 86 with 1 1/4 rockers. Okay, this is a 1904. And the guys who've ridden in this thing are just shocked how much power it has with a 2-barrel, with a very small 2-barrel. It has a 26-27 early, this is like, they put these on Pintos. They actually used to sell them at like Carcraft and places like that as a kit. And that's, I think, where I got it, I think, originally. And it has a Web 86 cam. I'm running, I don't know what my total advance is. I think it's 28, I believe, on this one. And if I put it up anymore, I would have a pinging problem. So I have to keep it, I think, right there. But I think that's what the total advance I'm running on. I don't recall exactly. Could be 30, but most of the time it's 28. So it's running 9-to-1, okay? And at 9-to-1, it can get, in this bus, I've gotten 22 miles a gallon plus, which is absolutely amazing gas mileage for a VW bus. They don't normally get that kind of mileage. That's also because I got gear ratios. You know, I've got 344 gears, and I have Bug 89 fourth in it. So it's kind of an interesting combination, and it has a lot of power. It climbs hills pretty good, except now because I'm running so much compression, 9-to-1 is a lot. And it does cool it down very quickly because I have the super cool tin on here, and I also have 2 oil coolers. So it's got the doghouse, and it has the 72 pass with a fan. So once I climb a hill at the top, towards the top of the hill, I'll usually have to let off the gas and downshift one or the other, and just go slow. You know, just go slow. Maybe go 60 instead of going 70, and just take it easy up the hill. And then on the way down, it cools right down, comes right down in temperature just within a very short period of time. So that's about the max, you know, you can do with street engine, and then you can still get good gas mileage. Now, you can do the same thing, you know, and this has stock valves and ported heads. So that's, again, I'm running stock valves. Now, if I ran big valves in this, I could probably go with a little more, you know, I could probably either get a little more advance on it, or I could probably, it might climb the hills a little bit better and not get as hot. But then again, I might have to give it a little more timing to make it run better. So there's just, these are types of things that when you're done with your build, that, you can play around with and try and get a little more out of it, get it to run a little better. And this is not what you do to a stock engine. You don't take a stock engine and bump the timing up to 14 and think it's going to work. It's just not going to work. The cam's too small for bumping up the timing. If you have a lot more air and fuel going in there, sometimes you can bump the timing up to make up for the lower compression. So anyway, I decided to make a video on this subject to kind of get your heads moving and get you guys thinking about it, all that stuff, and come up with some ideas on how you want to engineer your build and how it's supposed to work. And all right, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.